This company was bleeding crores of rupees in a month. It was on the brink of death in 2015.
A lot of people wrote us off at that point. And they said its business is over and now Tatas have taken over and this founding team is sort of finished and whatever it was.
Band kar do. This is never going to work. Who's going to buy online?
But something switched in 2016 and they became the biggest comeback story the Indian startup ecosystem has ever seen.
जरा सोचिए अगर आप इंटरनेट पर बैठकर हीरे खरीद पाएं और वो भी सर्टिफिकेट के साथ. Pioneer of online jewelry retail in India.
That money, it's just that the money became visible to everybody else now.
In today's video, we'll dive deep into not only how Tata's acquisition saved them, but also 4 core strategies that Caratlane deployed to disrupt the Indian jewelry market. This is the second episode of our new profitable startup series of the GrowthX Wireframe, and a fascinating story of Caratlane, the 17,000 crore comeback. But as always, let me give you some context first to the topic. Caratlane is the first ever Indian company that brought the magic of e-commerce to the experience of buying jewelry. Remember that as we go forward. But what's really interesting about this story is that the founder of Caratlane, Mithun Sacheti, was born and brought up in a Marwadi jeweler family. And starting up an e-commerce business in 2008 was really not something that someone in his shoes would have thought of. In fact, he had studied gemology in the US and was working full-time at his 50-year-old family business, Jaipur Gems. Mithun was a hardcore jewelry guy who understood the depth and nuances of this industry. The year is 2007. A time when Orkut was the most used social platform in India. Apple had released their first iPhone, and Flipkart, India's first e-commerce business, was about to be born. By this time, Mithun had already expanded the family business to Chennai and scaled the revenue to 80 crores with a profit of a healthy 10 crores. In his 20s, he had already achieved something significant, something that many Indians could only dream of in achieving in their lives. But at the most professional stage of his life, he had a Eureka moment. He saw the big e-commerce shift happening in the US and how Amazon and Blue Nile, which was like the Amazon for jewelry in America, had disrupted the market there. He predicted a similar transition happening in India and saw the possibility to make India's first ever e-commerce jewelry company. And he found 3 big problems with the traditional jewelry business at that time. See, the first problem was that every jewelry shop had an inventory issue. I'll explain. See, Mithun has said multiple times in the past that these shops always have more pieces in the shop than the number of sales that happen in the year. Inventory management was a mess since it's bad inventory turn business. And most of the time, the discovery of all SKUs just didn't happen for the user due to the excessive industry that these shops had. The second problem was that the margins on gold weren't just as high as they were on diamonds, and the price of gold was rising exponentially during this time. It went from 4,400 rupees to 18,500 for per 10 grams. That's more than 400% times, which is insane. This was hampering the demand for gold. And gold didn't seem to be the best thing to sell online, as gold jewelry was being looked on as a commodity and Indians were purchasing it for investments rather than the purpose of wearing it. And the third problem was that almost 90% of the Indian jewelry market was extremely disorganized. And the other 10% were brands like Tanishq and Kalyan. Most of the buyers relied on these street retailers, the next door, you will know these shops, Gupta or Sharma Jewelers. In fact, even today, this organized market has only increased to about 30%. This is where he saw the scope of a growing market that they could capture. All these 3 problems look like opportunities that made Mithun bullish to replicate the Blue Nile e-commerce model in India. So, Mithun leaves his family business, gets a loan of 75 lakhs from his family, and launches Caratlane with his co-founder, Srinivas Gopalan, in 2008. Later, Avnish Anand, the current CEO of the company and the first hire they made, joined the bandwagon, and the trio went on to disrupt the jewelry market. All hunky-dory, right? Now, a lot of things would go down between 2008 and 2016. So let's get into that. Caratlane was not always how you see it today. In the starting, they were into both B2B and B2C businesses. On the B2C side, they started with a website platform for solitaires and were giving customers more than 1 lakh choices by tying up with more than 5,000 suppliers. Basic question, why solitaires? Mithun knew that solitaires can be compared easily with certifications and specifications like depth, cut, clarity, table size, and so many other things. They made sure solitaires had certification from leading gem organizations so that they could borrow some credibility for them. Just check this picture from their website back in the day. Their team made sure that the customer knew exactly what they were going to buy. And to be honest, they looked pretty legitimate. And they also later expanded to jewelry and even gave customers the cheapest price guarantee. So that was B2C. On the B2B side, they were trying to help retail businesses like Tanishq in setting up their backend for e-commerce sales. See, traditional folks like Tanishq had no clue about integrating e-commerce into their retail business. So Mithun and team would pitch businesses like Tanishq to build a real-time backend system to help them run their supply chains better. This B2B, B2C, this went on and off for about 8 years. Now come to 2016, they had tried multiple things on their website end and the retail end, and even had big short investors like Tiger Global backing them. In fact, Tiger Global had pumped more than 280 crores into the business over a span of 4 to 6 years. But still, they were bleeding a huge loss of 63 crores. And Mithun wanted to actually expand more on the retail side because he was super bullish on the phygital model that he had thought of. But Tiger Global just was not interested. They didn't want to spend any more on them, and they were already seeing 2016 as a low growth year for Indian e-commerce, as the e-commerce industry grew by only 12% in 2016. They just didn't want to take that risk. But this was the time when Caratlane's biggest B2B client, Titan, came to their rescue. The jewel from the house of Tatas and India's leading lifestyle company bought off the entire share of Tiger Global and gave them a smooth exit. And this is where the real disruption started. Now that we have some good context till 2016, let's dive into the 4 core strategies Mithun and his team cracked for their epic comeback. Starting with the first big problem they had to solve, the trust problem. See, India is a price-sensitive market where a customer thinks more than twice before buying anything. I mean, think about yourself, right? And this is especially when you talk about purchasing something like a jewelry or a watch. It's not like buying a shoe or a t-shirt that wouldn't matter to you if it turns out different or defective. It's just a special purchase. You really want the jewelry to be as good as you thought about it or even better. And in a highly touch and feel category, you can use digital for conversion, but conviction will only happen at physical stores. So Mithun understood this core insight and went on to expand the company's physical footprint. Because once a customer visits a store and gets an idea of the quality and experience, they would not think twice before placing an order on the Caratlane app. So Caratlane went from having 12 stores in 2016 to having 220 plus stores in more than 75 cities right now. That's an 18x jump from 2016. Another master stroke was this simple line, a Tanishq partnership. Being billboards or stores everywhere, Caratlane was no longer just Caratlane. After the Tata acquisition, it started getting advertised as Caratlane, a Tanishq brand. So Caratlane borrowed the Tata's trust and used it to establish its new brand identity. Now, this was their offline expansion bit, and it's great. Now, this turned out to be a major difference between Caratlane and new emerging competitors like Bluestone, who are also following a pretty similar business model. In fact, Bluestone even raised funds from one of the biggest Indian VCs, Accel. But what it didn't have was a Tanishq brand backing. Also, while this was happening, all of Caratlane's other prior services like try at home for free, lifetime exchange guarantees, 30-day money back, and certifications from institutions were just a cherry on the cake. But while trust building was important, Mithun and team had an interesting user insight. And that's the second thing that the trio cracked. See, Mithun's team wanted to be the SaaS of the jewelry market. But how is that possible? He wanted to have a repeat rate as high as often seen in SaaS businesses. See, the repeat rate of customers for any Indian jeweler on an average is about 4 to 5%. But Caratlane went on to achieve a massive 25% customer repeat rate, which is 5 times the industry average. Now, this is not just by chance. There's an actual insight at play here. Let me tell you how, and this is where things get interesting. See, Mithun knew that they wanted to build for the new India. They didn't want to build jewelry for weddings. Their ideal customers were people who don't buy jewelry only for big occasions like weddings or engagements, but will buy jewelry for repeated smaller occasions like anniversaries, birthdays, promotions, etc. In fact, To give you an idea of how big wedding purchases are in India, 55% of the entire Indian gold jewelry market is entirely bridal jewelry. Mithun was looking to build something on the other side of this pie. He wanted to create a lifestyle jewelry brand. Their target audience were not only youngsters below 30, but they were selling to all age brackets. In fact, Avnish shared this in an interview that their customers come from multiple age brackets, which is contrary to the perception we had before we started researching on this topic. What worked for them is that they would smartly target the young, tech-savvy audience, as these people would later influence the purchasers in the house. Now let's understand this. See, in every house, traditionally, the influencer and the purchaser for jewelry has always been the mothers. But India was changing, and this influencing power was shifting towards a younger generation or the aware daughter of the house. Once you convince a daughter about your jewelry's product quality and the brand, she will do the rest of the job of convincing the entire family. She would become the influencer who would convince the purchaser in the family, and this is exactly what happened. Luring in these influencers became Caratlane's foot in the door, and these influencers would pave their way to convince the elder family members who would buy the expensive jewelry. This is where Caratlane really made money, the expensive jewelry purchases. Now, to convince these influencers, Caratlane got two things bang on. Number one was to nail the design and variety. So they made sure that they were the go-to brand for any and every occasion, so that our customer has plenty of options to buy from. See, the insight is strong. The way to differentiate in this category is by great designs and constantly refreshing the design stock. Over the years, they've expanded their catalog exponentially, be it hoop earrings, hug earrings, dangling earrings, or any other category, you name it, Caratlane probably has it. In fact, Mithun has said multiple times that they wanted to create jewelry for all freaking occasions, be it the 1st anniversary or the 15th anniversary. They wanted designs for everything. In fact, they even have designs for children with their Doraemon or Peppa Pig collections, and for youngsters with things like their Harry Potter collection. Now, this might sound basic today, but it was something that was just not done before in India. With this, Caratlane started becoming a lifestyle brand. Now, the second thing that they did to convince these influencers was pricing. They started offering jewelry at affordable prices, because as the price of jewelry increases, the likelihood of customer overthinking about the buying decision also increases. And they wanted this likelihood to be as small as possible. So they priced their jewelry at a very affordable rate so that people could at least try it on without thinking 100 times. Now, for example, the average selling price of Tanishq was anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5 lakhs, while for Caratlane, it was around 25,000. That is way lesser. In fact, they even went bullish on the silver jewelry market, as Mithun knew this market would pick up and they can gain a big share by making good designs under the sub 10,000 rupees price range. So they launched Shaya, their silver brand, and are now launching independent stores for it, which is getting a lot of love because of its aesthetics or store design. Introducing silver was also a very smart move, by the way, because once a customer would be convinced by the quality of silver jewelry, they can be easily upsold later during their next visit. Again, simple strategies, but effective. And this was the playbook. Make the barrier to entry super low, convince the influencer in the house, get them to influence others and elders in the family, and upsell them with expensive jewelry on the next visit. Now, understanding who your real users are only comes from having in-depth user insights. And that is at the core of what we teach our members at GrowthX. To give you an example, GrowthX members speak to at least 100 users across multiple products during the first 5 weeks of their learning experience. This not only helps them in them creating their projects, but it develops a muscle for them to mine user insights for their own companies where they can apply these learnings and create revenue impact. We close applications for round 2 of the GrowthX membership cycle this 3rd March. And of course, folks who apply early get high preference during the entire membership process. The link to apply for a GrowthX membership is in the description. Cool. So we discussed pricing, and great pricing makes sense. But how is Caratlane's jewelry so cheap compared to other competitors? I have 2 words for you. Operational efficiency. See, Caratlane claims to offer a 34% lesser price than street retailers. Now, the core reason for this is they are the margin kings. They increase their gross margins from 17% to 34% after their Tata acquisition. In fact, these margins are even better than the margins of Tanishq. This margin advantage is because of 3 reasons. First was because of the category that they were in. See, most of the product catalog of Caratlane still consists of diamond jewelry. And diamond is just a better business from a margin standpoint. Second reason is that their margin advantage comes from the cost that they save on their supply chain. See, usually a street jewelry retailer would rely on wholesalers, but Caratlane removed wholesalers completely from the picture and they moved their production in-house. In fact, they have adopted a Dell model, which means that the product goes into manufacturing only after the order gets placed by the customer. And since the product range is very simple and minimal, the turnaround time for delivery is also super quick, so that the customers don't experience any delay. By this, they also make sure to have a 0 inventory cost. That's correct, 0. And the third is the strong relationships with their various vendors they have across the world who provide supplies at a cheaper price. Now, this cost advantage only comes from experience in the industry, because these suppliers do not give you price discounts just on the basis of how much you order. They give you discounts on the basis of how long have you been working with them and what's their relationship with you. And here, Caratlane got an advantage of starting early in the industry and Mithun's family business background. In fact, their old ties, even from the time of their earlier B2B business, helped them here. Now, coming to the fourth and final thing that Caratlane cracked: communications. Before Caratlane, no one was thinking of adding tech to the jewelry business. And they have been the most vocal brand when it comes to the intersection of tech and jewelry. To make sure that they always come across as the most tech superior and advanced brand, they have been bullish in launching the most interesting and unique tech features ever seen in this industry. So for example, they were the first company ever in the world to launch a virtual jewelry try-on app. Think how you can try on specs at Lenskart. This is the same at Caratlane. In fact, they even launched a store in 2011 which had no jewelry, and you could just come and do some iPads through which customers could just see how the jewelry was looking on them and buy it. Now, this store turned out to be a complete failure, but still, you gotta give it up for the brave attempt in trying something that was never done in India before. Now, the most recent one, and something we found really fascinating, is the launch of the world's first ever jewelry with embedded messages, where someone can literally scan the ring and see the message the gifter recorded at the time of gifting. Think of it like a video postcard. That's incredibly amazing. In fact, they constantly push the idea of gifting in their campaigns. For example, their campaign of Khul Ke Karo Express was not only creative and launched on Valentine's Day, but it was interesting because it promoted the idea of mother-daughter gifting, or self-gifting, or gifting siblings. So they did this actively even for other occasions like Diwali, Rakhi, everywhere you can place jewelry and gifting basically. And this was something which is very different from other brands. They wanted to position themselves as the first choice whenever a customer thinks about gifting jewelry. And why were they doing this? Keep thinking back to the user insight and the new India that they wanted to cater to. That was something. Now, all of these brilliant moves led to Titan acquiring Mithun and the Caratlane's founders' entire share, giving them the largest exit for an e-commerce founder in India after Flipkart. Now, there is something I want to say before we end this video. Sure, some of you will go back thinking it was the Tata funding that saved Caratlane, but know that there's just a tiny fraction of it. The founders here are the real folks with grit who made it happen. We at GrowthX are long-term bullish on the startup ecosystem, and these are the founders and builders who will have a massive impact on the India growth story. So while others write them off, we'll always build hand in hand with these people. These are the kind of people we celebrate, and these are the kind of community members we have here at GrowthX. If a community like that is what you crave, GrowthX could be the right tribe for you. Now, to join them, head on over to the link in the description to apply for a GrowthX membership. Now, that's it for today. I'll see you in the next one.